So I took kind of a hiatus, basically learning more about the market, learning about different trends, made a couple of good predictions. So now I'm going to try to automate all of this. This has been a long time, and basically where I left off was creating this crazy master data management model to store any and all data. And now, I'm basically going to be showing how to use it over the next month or two to get all of this data in. So I want to import yesterday's data for the stock market that night, and analyze it and throw some decisions at it to figure out how is this going to benefit me? How can I make money off of it? So I found a NASDAQ listing with about 7,000 stocks. I didn't want to do any CSV import stuff because most of the stuff is irrelevant to me. All I really want is sector, industry, the name, and the ticker. The rest of this information changes by the day, but I'm going to use Python to actually pull data into the system. First, all data. Like Microsoft goes back to 86, so I can make some long-term decisions based on that. So right now, I threw all this in a function just so it didn't cloud up my primary piece right here. And yeah, essentially this is what I'm doing. Let me do some tests. Because we have essentially no data really in our group table, and a stock is basically a group underneath a tenant. So let's do this. GRP group, CDEFG. So I created a group called project stocks, and now the project stocks will own Microsoft and own anything under here. So I have to make sure to send a tenant up to tell my system that the system owns project stocks and project stocks owns this group data. So this group data can be whatever I can relate it to, transactions, mappings, whatever I want. But this will help me in the real world say, hey, the system owns this client owns all of their sub whatever. Allows me to separate data in the system, so I'm not looking at like a document table trying to figure out who does this belong to. We know it belongs to a particular project. So I want to create groups or organizations or containers or whatever you want to call them for each ticker that I have, and then start attaching more information to those tickers. Instead of saying, get all companies and see if they have a stock ticker, I'll work backwards. I'll have all tickers and then get company information from it later. So I got all this JSON coming through. I get my top 5. Let's see what they look like. Sweet. We'll do symbol. Names and sector industry. Names I'm going to use as a description. And I'm going to give the group name the symbol, because the symbol is unique in this situation. I'll eventually want to upgrade that to like an identifier of some sort, but right now this will help me work faster. 1, 2, ooh, nothing. Awesome. So Z and C doesn't have any classification, so that is totally okay. Alrighty. Get rid of this. Let me do some stuff here. Identifier. This is the market. I'm actually going to add 2 manually just so I have an easier fall through. Basically, when I am running through these, I want to create identifiers for the sector and the industry, but if I do run into the situation where I cannot classify them at this time, I want to mark them as unknown. So instead of always checking if unknown exists, I might as well just make it exist and let the other ones do its thing. So I'm looking for ref I, family, class is 1, I believe. Class is 1. Say unknown. Yeah, because that's also 1. I can essentially just copy this record, head over to type, paste this record, and be good. Actually, that's going to be wrong. It's 1293. All right, so group market, select ABO, C, get identifier, group, market, owner. There we go. But I want this information too in case we need to add stuff. So for this particular thing, what will I actually need for defaults? Not much. All right. So say I need unknown. I'll leave those for now. Identifier, market family. Market class. There we go. I'll make these ID. Boom. Alright. Now, in case they don't exist, I will need a new identifier, family ID. Identifier, type ID. And this would be type ID unknown. Excellent. This would be the unknown type ID. So as I'm going through here, I can essentially say, first I will make sure group exists. So I'll do add group ID equals group ID from CTBL group select where group key name equals symbol. Oops. And group tenant is 2, because this is the stock project, and actually in real code I would make sure to pass the tenant down. However, in this situation I just need to get this data in. This is a one-time kind of ingestion where I will use an API to find any new IPOs to add to this ticker list. So get my group ID. If the group ID is null, then we're going to have to insert the group ID, but we're in a cursor, so let's make sure that we null the group ID, attempt to get it, then if it's null, replace comma with a new line and a comma. What type of group is this? Good question. We're going to take a shortcut. Like I said, this stuff is one-time use. So the tenant is going to be the stock project 2. The group type ID is the next type ID, essentially 3, and that's just how it works. It is something under the tenant, not an actual parent. It is just a random subgroup that can be a parent, but it is not related to number 1, not related to the system. I want to make the name the symbol, and because names, the Excel document in here, some of these names are extremely long, talking about stuff that doesn't even matter. Like, you could have stopped right here. Kimco Realty Corporation, Class M, maybe even right here. But I don't care about all this information. It's not like part of the name. It's just like, oh, here's some information. So I'm going to throw that in descriptions, and we'll figure out how to get real names later. Probably a different API will help me create names. Actually, yeah. So we're going to use the key name on the symbol so I can update the actual name of the company, and it won't affect this code. Display order, it is active. I am trusting it. It's not cleansed to anything. Boom. So get me the group, if the group ID is null, insert that data, and then go back and give me the group. I could use an output clause, but then I would have to delete from a temp table because that's how the output clause works. So I will just do it this way. Now that I have a group, essentially I need to classify the group sectors. So that will essentially be if sector let's see, if sector is blank and the industry is blank, let's say, in case it's actually null in some cases, if it's empty, we are going to, let's say we're going to have a type to use. Identifier, type ID, to use. So we're going to clear this out. We're going to check to see if the sector and industry are empty. If they are empty, we're going to use the unknown. Else, at least one of them is not empty. We're going to make sure our family ID is cleared out. And actually, we're going to work backwards. We're going to say because we are nulling this out, we're going to come down here and this should still be null. So we're going to say get the identifier for group, market, sector, industry. Well, that doesn't give me anything. Then I know it doesn't exist yet. So I will have to go create it. And to create it, we're going to clear out the family ID just to prevent the iteration. You know, each loop, it might hold on to the previous value, so we're going to clear it out. Then we're going to try to get it. So let's get the family ID. Was it vfun ref tree? Sector first. Sector is more generic. So we're going to get the data from here. If the family ID is still null or is null, then we have to add it. So we will We're adding a tenant for the identifier. I like to keep my reference data available to everyone. There are some cases where I'd probably make more project-specific things, but there are some reasons down the line, for why I would want to do this. Where's the market? We know that the class ID is going to be under group market. That's what we want to do. Yeah. So the family name would be sector. We don't need a description as it's coming in. Because we're looking at key names, we want to make sure that we are passing the sector in, but based on our rules, we want to make sure it's upper. Caps. I trust it. It's active. The rest of it is irrelevant. So after we get that, we will be able to go back into our family and find what we're looking for. So if we get the family ID and for some reason the type ID is empty, actually there's one more thing. We should do this. Should clean the data. So let's say set the sector is if is null sector comma blank equals blank, then unknown, else sector, rinse repeat, industry. This will help us find mixed matches where industry is blank but a sector isn't, so we can get group market finance unknown and we can get group market unknown pharmaceuticals or whatever. Not only can we have a double, we can have unknowns within sectors and a sector that is just not known with actual known industries. That's what this piece of code is for, trying to figure out, based on the data that we get from here, if one of these is empty. It looks like they're either both filled out or not, but just in case, if one of them is not empty, we want to make sure to capture that data appropriately and not just say, oh, we didn't know either of them. So because we're replacing with unknown up here, it'll fall down and it'll try to add unknown under its appropriate, the sector first or the industry later. So now that we have that, essentially we got to do the same thing with, this is type, right? We know that it's not there. So identifier family would be identifier type. We're going to adjust the select statement. We know it goes type to family, so we can just update that. Copy paste. This is industry, but this goes back to family. Actually, let's shorten this up. Yeah, we know it's going to be empty anyways, but we will just repeat the pattern. Hey, get it for this industry. If it's still null, we're going to add the industry, but I mean, that's how we would retrieve it anyways normally. So this will insert the family ID of the family ID that we capture up here. This will be the industry we are looking for. After it's all input, we can, or inserted, we can grab it again. All right, so that is for the type ID. So after all of this, I should have type ID to use equals this. Where does this end? Right here. This ends down here. Let's shorten this up a little bit. Let's make it better so we're not overwriting. Try to get it. If it's null, go and insert the family. If you can't find the family, grab the family again. If cleared out, try again, which should still be null. If it's the identity or identifier type is null, go ahead and insert the identifier type, get it back through normal ways. Bump out to use identifier type. All right. Group identifier. I need you to replace the comma with the new line comma. So in these tables, just like the GRP group table has its tenant ID, these aren't reference tables because they do not have ref right here. So I assuredly want to mark this under the stock projects. And then I should have a to use now. I should have a group ID, which I will define at the top. I don't really need descriptions or key names or anything else for this, but I do need that value. And that I think I'm going to go to value as classified by RCFT. Because there's no identifier actual value here. We're using the identifier as an alternate classification for the group. Kind of like tags, but it's a form of identification. What industry do you belong to? So the rest of this, active and trusted. But as we want to do, if not exists, group identifier, group ID. doesn't exist, then do that. Then insert the data, then move on to the next. So, identifier to use, we want that cleared out. We have it cleared out. I like to kind of run through and grab, write down what you want to do. Then grab these different things and move them up to the top of the loop, the top of the cursor. So you can see basically this is what I'm trying to clear out. Set or select, it doesn't really matter. Bam. So let's see if we get 5 records. Null into family ID. Would be the family ID right here, but it couldn't get it. So looks like it's not pulling it. Identifier family. We're getting our data in there though. So why? It's under what it should be. Oh wait. Yeah, identifier family. Class is right, which is market. Family. Type. So let's go through and figure this out. Group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we got those in at least. Okay, so I come in here. I'm gonna flip out. If it's empty, make it unknown, else make it sector. Okay, make the identifier type, which we are nulling out. All right, if it's not unknown and unknown, try to get it. Should be empty. If it's empty, nope, it looked right. Right, that's identifier. Yeah, okay, never mind. For the family sector, try to get that ID. It's null. So come down, insert that data. 1 row, no errors. Go ahead and try again. Try again. Let's do this just in case. It shouldn't be an issue. I should try this again. Because if it is null, it'll create it and then get it. If it isn't null, it'll have it. So I kind of want to switch this to is not null, but that doesn't really matter because this kind of exists. So we want to get it again for the sector and industry. From class, family type. Yep. Tenant, family ID. But this says my family ID is no. Interesting. Okay. Damn it. So I guess it's been such a long time. My trees are from the bottom up, not the top down, which makes sense. Trees grow from the bottom up. So my family will not appear in here until it has a type associated with it. And type ID, identifier, type. Boom. Medical, dental, pharmaceuticals, 10, 11, 12. So let me just do a quick check on group. $10, 11, 12. Unknown. 10, 11, 12. 5 total. top 5. Look at it go. Amazing. Okay, now let's do all 7,000 and let's transaction this. Just some basic checking, and we want to do no count. One more test, all right. Nothing shows up, no errors, and release the floodgates. Oh, we got our prints, damn. So far, so good. Yeah. Lots of different specific industries. Awesome. $7,100 stocks. Boom. I want to see if Microsoft is in here again. Just once. Sweet. So put that in there just in case. Alright. So now all of my stocks are in. All owned by my project. Alright. In the odd case that I have to do this again, I will just save this. So, this is Yahoo Finance. Super simple. And let me pull up their site. Alright. So when I use their site, and I want their historical data, if I try to actually hit this site using the quote, I don't get a lot of data. I have to keep scrolling down. As you can see, it'll keep expanding until it doesn't. So that's what it asked me for, or that's what it gives me. But I have the ability to change this. So what I did is I figured out they were using Linux timestamp, but the same thing applies. If I peg this with Python, this is the data I get. It's a query-based item that allows me to expand more. Oh, this is year to date. Let me do a longer one. So I still get to the bottom, as you can see right here, and it'll keep expanding out until I finally hit it. So it makes it really hard to query this site with a particular period and then download it because of that feature that helps speed the load of the web page, which I totally get. So anyways, you can still inject the period into the download call, which is clicking this button. Right here. So you can see in the URL at the bottom, that is what we're doing. So I copied that link, sent it the period, basically downloads the file, uses Python, CSV to JSON, and this is what we get. We get our day for Microsoft, since we're basically saying since the 1900. For Microsoft, we get 1986 as our earliest, with our high of 10 cents. Look at that Dogecoin right there. What are we at now? Man, 250 bucks today. So anyways, with this call, since I get this JSON output, I will essentially want to have this input and this is commented out for a reason. Basically throw it in here. So I'll throw whatever ticker I want of the 7,000. It should give me all time, and then this in a JSON object. So similarly, how I had to iterate through the CSV file, this is more what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find an accurate list. So this will allow me to call the ticker, iterate, and pick these up. So this is where it gets a little confusing. Well, this is a single transaction, and that's all that really matters. A transaction has an event. So the name is kind of irrelevant, description irrelevant, but a transaction has an event, and the event has a time. So when we think of, close these since that worked. When we think of a transaction, this being a single transaction, we have some implied knowledge. That is who, the group that it came from. So we can use our reference, which is where my implied's at. There we are. Any table in our system can relate to this. So we can say our group ID. These are all the transactions that have a reference to a group, and our date for an event. And here's our date time, or our date for the event. And what this allows us to do is, because these two properties will trigger a positive or a negative. Yes, I found a transaction that matched that group ID and that specific date. If we did find that transaction, I have some data for you. I have an open, a high, a low, a close, an adjusted close, and a volume for that day. So these are numerics, and these are vertical, similar to our classifications with sector and industry, except for more static. So each transaction, one needs to have a record event, or when this had actually taken place, which is not a record event because we're recording it today and it did not take place today. So I will try to think of a name, but I still need to define this data. So I can go ahead and define that data in my numerics. So I have a numeric Rome class family type. Let's see how far I got. Did not get that far at all. So here's Q. This realm is a transaction. Oh, is that number 2? Yep, okay. Class. The class of numerics, we'll say this is stock-based. Financial. Is 2. Family. Stock. Stock market. Stock. That's 3. Oh, I did not pay attention. And the type. So for the type, what we know is we have open, high, low, close, adjusted close, and volume. So we have open price, or let's do price open. Because if we kind of reorganize how we think about naming things, it should make the realm class family type a lot easier. So we have price open, price close. Price high. Price low. Adjusted in volume. price closed or close, adjusted, price close, adjusted. So now we say, hey, you know, what type of price close do you have? Well, I have this one, and I have an adjusted one. So we can, you know, look for a specific name or look for a partial name. And this works just like the taxonomy we use in the realm, class, family, type. What? More specific, very much more specific, or variant of. These deal with price. This is open and close, high and low. This is also closed, but this is adjusted. And finally, volume. Yeah, I'll just do volume. So, trade volume. Yeah, trade volume. That'll work. That will work. So now that I have these taken care of, I already have my date taken care of. I essentially need to classify my date, so I will do the same thing with the event, but I technically only need one. How far did I get? Not far at all. So I have a transaction. That's 3, realm, class. What do I even name this? Occurrence. I think that'll work. Occurrence. That seemed like a good name. This is an event. What does this have to do with? Hell if I know. Ooh. This is like a this event is an all-day event. It tracks the entire day. Let's see what Google will do for me. Give me some event types, Google. Networking session. Oh, session. Session kind of has a technical term. What other types you got? Oh, these are actual events. Seminar, half-day event. I'll do full-day event. Or full day, because it's the event class, full day. And that'll actually help me look at partials as well. So I know if it's a partial day or a half day event, that I will not compare the event date. I can switch over to the date time. So there we go. Full day it is. This is a transaction event. The class is a full day event. The family of full day events. Is it trade? What do they call that? Oh, type is the trading session. Um, guess it's a financial event. I don't know. Let's do trading session. 3, 2. Full day trading session. This is the hardest part about this system, is trying to figure out what to call stuff. Number 2, what type of event is it? I guess since we have transaction, full day trading session, what's there, what's left? And I guess it's just generic. It's just a generic full day trading session. There's nothing fancy about it. So I should be able to go in here. Get event for one transaction, full day trading session, generic, bam. Now I want to go back to my numerics, element, stock, financial, transaction, financial, stock. Boom. Sweet. And finally, one more, and that is defining the reference relationship. Reference, realm, class, family, type. So we have the transaction realm, just because this is where it exists. This exists in the transaction realm. Or domain. That's 4. Class. What class is it? Well, what is this relating to? This transaction is relating to a group. Actually, I gotta make sure that this... Yep. Okay. All right. So the relationship between a transaction and a group, this is 5. And what family of relationships or reference might this be? It's not a child of, it's not a functional relationship. It doesn't, it's not required. It is dependent. So we don't really need this because we could just analyze the data. Could be, no, that it's not a child. The group is not a child of the transaction. A group is a parent, an owner, a parent. It's another name for owner. Hey, Google, owner synonym. Landlord, like tenant. Keeper, holder, possessor, homeowner. Owner. Because the group actually owns the transaction. That's 6. So what type? It's direct. It is direct. You know, instead of owner, I'll say parent. Parent-child makes sense. This group is technically the parent of the transaction that happened, so that makes sense. So instead of numeric, it's reference. It's kind of good to see this written out so you can see how consistent this stuff is. Transaction realm, it's for the group. It's parent, direct. What do we get? 10. So now essentially we have our relationships. We'll have a group ID. We'll be able to take a line of this data, say group ID in the reference relationship plus event type ID for the date, because event type ID both of these relate to transaction. So it's kind of a little interesting where instead of joining, we're basically, hey, give me this and this, where they collide should be a single transaction ID. And that single transaction ID is what will get updated. But if there isn't one, then we can add it. And when we add it, we will add the numerics. So that should be it. We can start ingesting data. So when I make a procedure that I'm going to reuse a lot, I try to use JSON as my communication in these procedures, input and output, and who's running it. That's why you see this declare up here. So that's what we'll start out with. What's important is that Stocks project owns this data. The payload, let's say right now, this will be ticker. But it's going to be more. And the response, we don't know about that just yet. So that is the topmost of my procedure. What this procedure will have to do is get the data. So we're going to have to, oh, do you freeze on me? Oh, you bastard. Okay, there we go. Close all this stuff out. We're gonna have to turn this into a procedure as well, because we're going to say, you know, blah, blah, blah. Say, get the data, will execute, what kind of naming? Stocks, Yahoo Finance, beginning of time. Say daily beginning of time. So this will be our first run. I don't know if Yahoo's going to yell at me and tell me to knock it off, so I'm basically going to run this on a wait for 5 seconds and just, you know, come back. In 8 hours, just to get all the dailies up for all 7,000 stocks. And this is because I don't want to get blocked by like the best source of data. So yeah, we'll put a 5-second wait for on this. It'll just iterate through. And then we'll create a different one similar to this. We'll create a function that will be able to convert a date into this numeric value, so we can do, you know, each and every day different kind of threaded. We'll find our non-banning type stuff, because worst case scenario, since we're doing it in Python, we can spoof headers and make it think that we're something else. Hopefully we can spoof IPs and all that good stuff. So this will execute the data and actually essentially do the same stuff, even though the procedure doesn't exist yet. We will just pass the payload forward, no modifications, and the output will be our transaction list. Actually, it's JSON. So we will call this procedure. It'll go in, grab it, come out. We can actually say, you know, date range, all, else, you know, this is day, so send an overload to today or yesterday or whatever. And we move farther and we can actually relate these as definitions to actual procedures and parameters and blah, blah, blah. But we will just make this as simple to get going. Now, what do I need? All my other stuff. I need a reference type ID for transaction to group. Event type ID for trading session. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, numeric type IDs for price and volume. This will have the group ID in it. And then for this procedure, we need transaction ID. Do we need that? No, we don't need that. We just need the transaction ID. We need a date ID. We need a date time. Date. We will need these. And I think that's it. Oh no, darn it. We need the transaction type ID. Do I have anything in there? Please. Ref transaction type. Oh yeah, I do. Woo. Sweet. Okay, so I get this data back, and then for each of these items, I already know what group ID it is, so I will have to take the group ID, and I will bring this down. I need all of this stuff no matter what, and I will be reusing it, absolutely reusing it. So I have my group ID and my reference type ID right here. I say, give me transaction ID where transaction ID has this event type with this date and this group ID reference. If I get a group ID match but no date, because of the and, it'll say it doesn't exist. Therefore, I need to insert. When I insert, I need the type ID. And when I insert, I will need the numerics. Boom. So, select transaction ID from transaction, where the transaction ID is in the transaction reference transaction ID from transaction reference where the reference type ID is to this group, or it describes that this is a group, and the primary key implied is related to the group ID. So if the transaction ID has a relationship to the group, show me it. And the transaction ID is in the transaction event, transaction ID, so for the incoming date and the group, give me a transaction ID. Since we are in a cursor, will be. Make sure to null this out. So that'll tell me if the transaction ID exists. Simple intersection of two relationships. If the transaction ID is null, I know that I have not created this record yet. Or I haven't imported this day yet. So I want to first get a transaction ID. SVTBL transaction insert. This will be for the operating tenant, which will be 2. I know this transaction type ID is correct. We got to come up with a good unique name, so it's probably going to be the ticker symbol concat ticker with date, we shouldn't have a double at any point in time. So that'll help us retrieve what's going on. We still want to make this relationship check. We don't really want to, look this up by a name, because who knows. So we'll still do that relationship check again to get it. But because of how this works, we have to get this transaction ID, and we can't depend on this existing. So in this case, we have to use that output, and I hate using them so much. Add identity or whatever, those aren't 100% accurate. What? You're a liar. Yeah, we get transaction ID. Why do you say you're not there? It, I can't say transaction. I have to do TRX. Is it because of this? Oh, my bad. Damn, Elric, you so dumb. Okay, I got that. I'm back. Just had to click. It's been forever. We don't care about any of that. It's active and I trust it. All right. So, unfortunately, like I said, we want to create a unique name just so we can figure out where it's from, easy to read. And actually, we want to say this is full day. There we go. And then we will get the transaction ID from our transaction output, and we'll delete it. So it won't have any data in it for the next round, just in case. And because we are clearing our transaction ID, it'll work. Okay. I really dislike how that has to be done, but we don't want to look it up by name because it could, there could be more stuff in there, and we just don't want to do that. We want to create this relationship, this particular date, this particular reference that will bring us to what we need. So that's where we get it. Okay, so now we have a transaction ID, and what do we need to do with the transaction ID? Record the event, record the relationship, record the numerics. So that's only if this is null. So we will start to do those as well. And I'm gonna steal this code because why not? It's backwards. It's backwards. Boom, boom. If it doesn't exist, transaction event transaction ID is our transaction ID. Begin. This is our operating tenant. We know what type ID it is. We know what transaction ID it is. I don't really have any use for this information or this information, but I do for that. Now, we'll do a quick convert just for 0. We'll have a date here, but what we really need is the date ID. So we want to say select date ID from our date. Now I've went over this. This is my crazy date dimension. It is split. It's massive. Essentially this is just what it looks like. But there are so many slices of the data, and we basically want to get this date ID. So we have all this other information attached to it for analysis. You could use any sort of date dimension. This is on my coffee page. However, I do have a video explaining how it's made if you want to take that on. It's a fun project. It's a fun way of getting into the system to figure out how things are separated and how every single piece of data is the same. So, alright, if it doesn't exist, date transaction ID trading session, then go ahead and clear out the date, get the date ID for the incoming date, insert that data. We don't need most of it, and we're done. Same thing. This time I can do this instead. Same thing. It's not ref, it's transaction reference. We know it's the operating tenant, whoever's going to be using this. We already have our reference type ID and our transaction ID. This stuff is irrelevant to me at this time. For this particular relationship, I know I have a group ID, but I have to get that, which is okay. Actually, for the most part, instead of using nulls, what we can do is let our defaults take care of the rest, and that is a pretty good practice. If you've programmed defaults into your system, there's no reason not to let your system do it. I do like specifying my actives and trusted. Get in the habit of doing that, just because it kind of lets you 1, 2, 3, 4. Say, you know what, I'm not going to trust this data from this data source. So yeah. Cleans up the code a little bit. But I did not get the group specific dataset number, so. Actually, do I have? Nope, I'm the wrong one. Oh, either or. Sweet. Yes. Sweet. Okay. I'll bring this down here. We're gonna have to fix all this. Actually, let's fix this right now because we keep passing over it. It's not good. go. That's my specific data set number for this to tell me that's the table it belongs to, which is really important. It's not just trying to figure out what the relationship is, but without a relationship, we should be able to figure out, this is a primary key in a table with two primary keys. It's really hard to figure out where the table comes from. Like, where does this primary key come from? What table? And that's why this comes into play. So we think of every table as two identifiers. One, what is the data set? Two, what is the primary key? And we can join those together with other things and then describe why they're joined together. So that's essentially how our relationships are modeled throughout this entire system, but for reference data versus a relationship data, reference data is not going to change. So, yep. Actually, I think this is wrong. This is separate. Yeah, this is wrong. This will keep expanding. We want to look for a particular date. And not just a particular date. Yeah, okay. So those are two separate select statements where both of them could be true, and then I could have, I don't know. It's an in. So I guess both ways might work. This just makes a little bit more sense. Give me for this date where it's related to myself. Kind of nesting it instead of two different positives where I can get 5 IDs and 10 IDs and then, oof, not good. So I'm going to chain this down instead. If it works the other way, it works the other way, but it's kind of like, I want to make a link versus like a fork. I'm going to make a chain instead of a fork. But yeah. All right. 1 second, I need to vape. So after we get the transaction ID, we see if the event's attached. Attach the event if it's not. We see if the relationship is attached. Attach the relationship if it's not. And this is the worst. But we only have to technically do it once. But we have to do it 6 times. That's not it. Just do it the easy way. Ugh, gross. For each one, close. If it doesn't exist, then add it. Price close adjusted. But see how easy it is to do this horizontal instead of vertical. I mean, kind of. Vertical, if you wanted to add more stuff, you have to modify your table. But here we do not. So we did close, close, high, low, open, volume. Close, close, high, low, open, volume. Boom. Sweet. Simple error catching for now. We actually need to get data before all of this. So our group ID be JSON value from our incoming payload at the group ID level. Our ticker will be at the same, but we need to declare that. There's our high-low and all that all right here. Make sure. Okay. What's red? Yeah, that's fine. Sweet. So I will call, get back a transaction list and say, alrighty. noticed that. It's weird. I don't like that it's not picking that up. I feel like there's some sort of unclosed something. Alrighty. There we go. There we go, that's what it was. Okay. Sweet. More or less, that should load some data. So let's save this code. Let's do stocks. Sorry. Stocks. Do Yahoo Finance. Just daily. No defaults. Load that. same stuff from here. So I'm just passing that payload forward. I really just need that. Oh. Let's get this not looking so gross. I actually don't have a Python. I do not. I need that. Dynamic SQL, I guess. Okay. Response will actually be the output. Boom. Go in, download, send back. Meow meow. Whew. Oh, so I'm hitting that 2-hour mark. All right, 2 hours to import all of these stocks, tickers, and set this up. So essentially what I'm going to do offline is just for each cursor, create some JSON that matches this and send it here. And this should, oh, I gotta do this. And I misspelled it. Whatever. Such is life. Control Shift R. There you go. So that is what I will do. Thanks for tuning in. 2 hours, quite a long time, but I get to run this thing 8 hours, go to bed, wake up, and have the entire market loaded for the 7,000 stocks locally here, so I don't have to worry about API calls anymore with averages and closes. And then soon I hope to start automating this stuff so I can sit here and see the trends and draw my lines and see the EMAs. But I want SQL to tell me, hey, you should look at this one because I've analyzed all 7,000. And I think that's the power I'm looking for, is not trying to randomly pick and go through 7,000 a day, but have SQL tell me what to do. Hey, you should really watch this. And that'll be extremely beneficial. So thanks again for watching. I will see you guys soon. Let me get that loaded and start working on the math to draw trend lines. Bye-bye.